All right, this is Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men, and you are listening to Start the World. My first guest today is Tanner Guzy. He runs a style business called Masculine Style, runs a successful consulting business. He's also the author of a book that I would recommend titled The Appearance of Power. And I had Tanner on the show first because he's actually one of my favorite people to talk to. Which has surprised a lot of people. In many ways, we couldn't be more different. Tanner is a Mormon. He has a wife and 4 kids. I'm a pagan and, kind of the Rock Hudson of the manosphere. And, the thing about Tanner that we get along so well is that we are both extremely passionate about the power of visual symbolism and the importance of beauty. And so I was thinking about this the other day. So Tanner, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jack. I'm really excited to do this because we've done this unofficially so many times, and now to really have a thread is going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so, all right. So I want to start with something that you do to troll your Instagram audience. And you did it yesterday, and I saw it, and it's Tanner puts up all these images of really elaborate men's warrior costumes, and this is something I've noticed for years as well. And then writes underneath it, "Real men don't care about what they look like." And I think it's a great little troll because you hear that all the time. And it's ridiculous, and I don't know where it comes from. I think that maybe men heard it from women. In many ways, it's a blue-collar thing that, only the upper class cares what they look like, and we get our hands dirty. And then, and I also think it's, like I said, I think it bleeds over for women to a certain extent, because I think women and gay men to a certain extent like to have this idea of a real man as being this unthinking, unconscious brute that savages you.
Yes.
And so that person can't be self-aware in any way. They just have to be like a series of grunts and, but
they just manifest his beauty without putting any effort into it.
Exactly. Yeah. They just appear that way, by accident, So why did you start doing this? Aside from what we just talked about.
Really, because it was one of those things that as I started writing Masculine Style, I started talking about the appearance of power and why men should be concerned with the way that they look. That was the most frequent response that I would ever get. And it's funny to me because I remember 10 years ago when I first started, I would go on to these different forums or these blogs, and it was all this kind of stuff that you and I have been talking about forever, how to become a better version of yourself and what masculinity is versus what it isn't. And always the highest engagement threads were the ones that were talking about, here's what a real man looks like. And it was always these factions of, well, we dress like Cary Grant, or it's in the 40s, or no, real men don't care how they look. And it was so funny to me because if you didn't care that much, you wouldn't be 15 pages deep into a comment thread trying to convince other people that you don't care. You would just ignore it. Nobody would be talking about this stuff because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you often also say, if you don't care about what you look like, that also comes across.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
And I think it is easy, people, if they're in college and they're just wearing sweatpants or whatever, then that's fine. But I think that you get to a point in life where you're supposed to, you want to give off a certain look. You want to give off a certain presence. And their expectations, especially as you're older or you're a leader of something, or people come to you, if you're a business owner, people come to you and they have a certain expectation that you're going to look like you have your shit together. And so if you're in a pair of college sweatpants, that's not communicating that. And it just
Absolutely
makes people respect you less, right?
Well, and it's funny because it goes through this whole cycle, because you're right. You see that in young kids, especially college kids or something else, where there's that way. And then you get into the world where you need to make an imprint and you you do look for things like authority and credibility and respect. And then you have a lot of men who jump off on the other end. I had a guy on Twitter the other day who told me he used to be in suits and ties all the time. Now he's retired, and he loves that he can wear polo shorts or polo shirts and cargo shorts all the time, and nobody cares because that's what's comfortable. And really what he is grateful for is he now lives in a world where he has the comfort of zero expectations, and aesthetically he can now signal that of, you don't get to have any expectations of me, I don't have to have any expectations of me, I've arrived, and this is what you get, is me having peaked at whatever points in my life.
Yeah. Now there is kind of a flip side to that I've noticed. Just maybe it's just a West Coast thing. In LA, there was always kind of a rule like that. The person who's in jeans and t-shirts is probably a millionaire, and all the people who are trying to look really good around them are not.
Right.
But
yeah,
because they're focused on other things. But
right.
you can kind of
Which
tell
is still
they're
an
still wearing like a
intentional
400
signal.
pair of jeans. But
exactly.
Yeah. But
no, that's all the guys. Because one of the other more common arguments that you get, especially now, is, well, Zuckerberg was successful even though he dresses like a bum. And it's like, okay, well, yes, one, he does, but two, he was successful in spite of that, not because of that. Otherwise, every programmer who just wore crappy gamer t-shirts and baggy sweatpants would be worth billions of dollars, and that's not the case.
right.
And two, he is spending $400 on his jeans and $200 on his t-shirts. This is a very intentionally curated aesthetic that may have started off haphazard, but it has been maintained. It's part of his brand. It's part of the whole tech revolution of the middle finger to the old paradigm of what business in the world used to be. And they will reject you if you wear a three-piece suit just as vociferously as somebody who was in banking 50 years ago would have rejected you for showing up in sweatpants and a t-shirt. So they still care. It's just a different signal that matters.
Absolutely. So, let's dial it back a little bit. How did you actually get started talking about this?
So I've been hypersensitive to it for most of my life because there's a couple different things. One, having a unique last name like Guzy, my family was always pretty aware of our reputation and how we represented each other, and we were kind of taught that way. And I remember as a kid, my mom would dress us up to go to school, and I hated tucking in my t-shirt to my cuffed up jeans because this was like 1994 and that's what you wore. But she was very insistent on that. Then in about 10 years later, I went to a private school, and it was the expectation of gray slacks, a white button-up shirt, and a rep tie. But I was interested in BMX bikes and punk rock. I wanted to have green Liberty spikes and have battle jackets with band patches and suspenders and, plaid pants and my Doc Martens and everything else. And so I was in these two worlds and had these two very contrasting ideas and identities. And both of them were very focused on what you looked like. Who you were was very much represented by how you dressed. And so it was this juxtaposition between these two that's made me always aware of it. And so as I got older and I kind of moved away from the punk rock stuff, the same thing that you just talked about, that transition of just being a punk kid, but to realizing that I needed to be able to look like an adult if I wanted to succeed, and I needed to change my style to reflect my ambitions. I just started writing about it as a way to kind of share what my own experience was, and it's resonated with a lot of men. And so it's been fun to watch that blow up.
I just remember when I was in Orlando, and I happened to be surrounded by a table of your clients, and it was really interesting to talk to them because a lot of them are software engineers and just regular guys, and they had come to you realizing that they could look better and they could be. Some of them are newly divorced. They need to go back in the dating world or something like that. And they realize that they need to come off better. And they really liked what you did with them because you looked at their wardrobe and their lives and what situation that they had to be in. And that's a really good way, I think, for anybody to think about it because, even for me, I mean, I was thinking, I'm like, well, when I go to Switzerland,
Mm-hmm.
like what okay, I'm going to be in this kind of hotel and I'm going to be doing this kind of thing. And like,
Yep.
what do I need to have to go and do all those things?
Yep.
And so tell me a little bit about how you came up with that concept and how you work with these guys and help them find a better wardrobe without, spending all their money and following shitty trends.
Yes. So it's been fun to figure that out over the years, because I started the way a lot of guys in my industry do, which is basically a stylist, where it's, let's pick out a business casual wardrobe for you that's one of like the same four that I give to everybody else. And then you go buy these clothes that I recommend, and we're good. Except the problem was is I would follow up with my clients 6 months later, and like 80% of them were wearing the same clothes they were before we started working together. And so I would dive deeper with these guys, and it's like, okay, well, tell me why. We had all this stuff. You looked great. You were more stylish. What's the problem? And it's, where am I going to wear a sport coat? Yeah, I look better in a sport coat, but I I run a landscaping company. Why would I wear this? Or I work in software. What am I doing with these great dress shoes when everybody else is in sneakers? And so it was through, unfortunately, a lot of trial and error with some of my early clients that I came to realize that more than anything, especially because when you start paying attention to anything related to men's style, you'll hear the mantra that fit is king. And especially as we started to move away from baggy stuff into slimmer stuff, everybody's just like, just make your clothes skinny and then you're stylish. Hey, it looks good. And that's not the case at all. Context is king. Context and understanding who you are, what your environment is, what the signals you want to send, who the audience is, how you take who you are on the inside and manifest that externally. That's how you dress really well. That's how you create a really good, authentic, and congruent sense of style, that when you see yourself in the mirror, you see the best version of yourself looking back at you, instead of this monkey who's a mannequin for somebody else, or this bum who's never progressed from who he was when he peaked in high school or when he started college. And so it's taking all of these external and internal cues and putting them together to create a very unique and personal sense of style that you feel great and people treat you the way you want to be treated while you're wearing it.
Interesting. Okay, and so how do you think that this fits in to the bigger project of, I guess, empowering men sounds cheesy,
Right.
but really we are, because people spent so many decades empowering women,
Mm-hmm.
and men just kind of followed along and really are at a very confused place in society.
Right.
And so you and I and a lot of the speakers at the 21 convention and a bunch of other guys are actually starting to realize that men are really lost.
Mm-hmm.
I started giving advice to a very different group of men, and then I realized that, wow, all men are lost.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real problem and a real need out there. How do you think helping them with, their outward appearance feeds into this bigger picture of a change maybe that we're trying to create in society?
Yeah, that's a fun question, because from the surface, it just looks like it's a surface thing. It's just vanity. It's just, the icing on the cake. And for some people that is, but what's cool as I found is it doesn't matter where you are on this journey of self-optimization or self-empowerment or whatever the term is that we want to use it, because for the guys who are just getting started, it's really nice to have a pretty easy win. Because if you think about going to the gym or getting better with women or developing a more marketable skill set or anything else, those are all absolutely much more important than the clothing you put on your body. And those also could take a very long time to see results in. And so it could feel like you're in the slog. And why are you putting in all this energy and this effort when you're not actually seeing any returns on the investment? But with your clothing, you can get that done in a matter of weeks, if not faster. And so it's a very quick and an easy win that a lot of guys can glom onto. And then it gets that momentum starting to work for them instead of against them. So for guys who are coming in at it from that beginner level, it works really well from there. The other thing that I think from that same beginner that's really good about this is it gives you the opportunity to experience a little bit of social risk. We live in such a comfort induced world that any risk is gone, right? It's gone. If you even are social risk, because it used to be, yeah, the Industrial Revolution and civilization eliminated a lot of the need for physical risk. We could outsource violence, you can outsource all these other things. But even when we were kids growing up, you still had to engage in social risk where if you were going to call a girl, maybe her dad was going to answer the phone, or your friends would see you in school and you had to engage with learning how to interact with them that way. But with things being the way they are with the internet and online, it's gone. All risk is gone, which means we don't get the victories, because why would you take the chance of getting the victories when you have these huge potential losses? So we just stay in this comfort zone of mediocrity and complacency. But style is one of those things that is a very out there and a very socially projected way of taking on some risk, so that a lot of these guys can learn, one, the rewards are awesome, and two, if I do screw it up, it's not as scary as I think it is.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
from that perspective, it works really well for these guys.
Yeah, it fits into actually the bigger picture, you know, in a way, in the sense of like, there used to be very rigid expectations of what everybody had to wear.
Mm-hmm.
In much the same way there used to be rigid expectations of what a man actually is.
Exactly.
And what his role is and so forth. And now, you know, there are no expectations, you know, that saying everything is permissible. And, you know, everyone can just look like a slob, and no one's really going to judge you. I mean,
right.
There's a social circle where someone will judge you, but you don't have to be in it. I mean,
exactly. You just find another circle.
Yeah. I mean, I make fun of my town all the time. I mean, people literally go to the grocery store in pajamas. Like most of the people in town go to the grocery store in pajamas, you know?
Right. Because why wouldn't they? Because those are there's no expectations for them to rise up to meet.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm just as bad. I mean, I had I was sick. I was telling you I was sick, and I went to the grocery store the other day with like a barbarian hat on, like a skew, and I'm like in sweatpants and a sweater, just buying stuff. And I actually there was one, I don't know where she came from, but one very put together, like older woman, and just looked at me like I was a piece of trash.
You're so disgusting. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your judgment.
Yeah. I was just funny. I'm like, of all people, it was me, but I was like kind of amusing. But you know, so like, yeah, like you said, that is the challenge of masculinity in the modern world, is that it's not necessary, and it's not required. And so it's a choice. And that's been a big part of my message for the past several years, is that it's a choice, and it's for you, because no one really cares. No one really cares what you do. You can be a slob, you can lay around, you can be 500 pounds. The government will take care of you. You don't have to do anything.
Right.
And so this is all for you and your spiritual development. Really. And so, you know, in many ways, what you're doing is just another piece of that. You know, you can decide, you can look like this amazing guy, or you can be a slob.
Right. Because that's the other thing, is I get most of the guys who work with me come at it from the other end, where they're not just starting on this, but they've got their fitness dialed, they've got their finances dialed, they've got social dynamics and relationships really unlocked, and then they realize that their style is all the way down here. And it's like, no, this is totally incongruent. And I've made all these changes in my life, but when I see myself in the mirror, I still look like the guy I was before I started to make all these changes. Yes, I'm in a little bit better shape, but a lot of times you can't even see that through the clothes, because they're the clothes I wore when I was fat or when I was too skinny or whatever else. And so it becomes more glaringly obvious when you don't have it, in comparison to all the other virtues and the strengths that you do have. And you won't be able to see all those other things reach their full potential if you don't have your aesthetics and your appearance on lockdown too.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people would, you know, make an argument, which I'm not really very sensitive to this anymore, but an argument that a lot of this is just, you know, very consumeristic.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know, I could see
You're not
that,
your khakis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that maybe people would make that. But then again, you know, like, as you said, you know, men have always cared what they look like.
Yeah, because
So let's
that's not
not
the
make it
point
about
that we're
that.
making. We're not saying that if you buy the latest brand or
Right.
jump on the latest trend, then now all of a sudden you have an identity and you can finally feel good about yourself and people will like you. And because that's a problem when guys think that. And you see guys who are brand whores or they're trend hopping and they're doing all this stuff because they're looking for this external validation to solve an internal problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
But good style is internally derived, and it's that manifesting. And that's one of the reasons why it's so powerful is you're taking your internal world and you're having the audacity to project it onto other people and make them experience what your world is. You're forcing your visuals and your aesthetics onto them.
That of all conversations for him to come up with, but my friend Rex just popped into my mind because he has Teflon horns implanted in his head and so forth, and he always used to say what my externality is a visual representation of my internal landscape.
Yes.
It's something,
and that is for most of us.
yeah, well, I mean, it should be, and in many cases I don't think it is as much. I definitely think that way.
Mm-hmm.
I've been telling guys for years, especially guys who were maybe on a more political end of the spectrum or who have a great message. And my saying for years has been, you have to be a vessel for the message.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have to be able to represent this idea that you're bringing across because no one wants to hear about, me, for example, no one wants to hear about masculinity from a slob.
Right.
No one wants to
Because
hear
it's
about
totally incongruent.
Yeah, you have to, you have to embody these ideas. And so
Right.
it is important. It does matter.
Well, on the other side, the other side gets that because the erosion of masculinity did not just happen with people writing very well thought out and rational blog posts over the last 40 years. It's happened because of art and film and music and culture and all these other things that are largely emotional and aesthetic, but it creates a vehicle for whatever their message is. And if all we're doing, because we're so hyper autistic that it's like, no, I'm on 4chan, or no, I'm writing blog posts, or no, I'm tweeting about this stuff. It's like, okay, you're not going to do anything that has any real meaning to it because your kids aren't going to want to grow up to be an edge poster on Twitter. Nobody's going to care about that. You have to give them something to aspire to, and we aspire to things that look awesome or look beautiful or look aspirational.
Yeah, I mean, that's, another thing that I've always been saying is that we compete with Hollywood.
Yeah.
In the marketplace of ideas,
Absolutely.
we compete with Hollywood. And so if you have a message that is counter to something that you see in Hollywood, it's your job to be as close as you can. And we have the technology now. I mean, there was years ago, I mean, you couldn't compete with that in any way.
But those gates are down.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here with lights around me. I remember when I first started taking photographs on film back in the day.
Yep.
I used to take them down to the Walgreens to have them developed in an hour. And the lights, I couldn't afford lights. I mean, they were like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, real photography lights. I mean, that was all like way out of what I could afford when I was a young person learning how to do this. And now I can get lights for $100. Like through Amazon. I mean, I can have them here the next day.
They'll be there in 2 days.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so we have all this technology. I mean, I was just telling you, obviously, I have this new camera that, takes images in 4K and it looks as good as anything else you'll see when the professionals use. And so if you can compete at that level where you have a professional presentation, and of course style is part of that, then your message is taken more seriously.
Yep.
And I think that
it penetrates on an emotional level instead of on just a rational level, so people convert to it even more.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is our nerd zone right here, where we actually talk about symbolism and how it influences and the importance of beauty. Because and that's a thing with men, that men pretend that they're not supposed to care about beauty because, I don't know, I guess it was like assigned, like the division of labor, decorating was assigned to women. Beauty. So they got beauty, right? And That wasn't
Which
the
in what
case.
culture did that happen, right?
Right. Only, yeah, like I said, I maybe all this is really a consequence of the Industrial Revolution and the kind of class divides that happened as a result of that and so forth,
Yep.
because
Partner that
that
up
was
with really
not the
brutal
case.
wars that killed emotion in the men that survived them and their need to be able to handle those things. And there's so many factors that come into this, but ultimately the result is if you care about aesthetics, somehow you're less of a man. And historically, we're the anomaly in that. We're not the norm.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, almost to the point of chauvinism where you can be like, well, who actually made all the good art in history?
Yep.
Like it's all men.
Right.
Like we are actually romantics. That's kind of what we've always done.
Yep.
And the idea, it's difficult to imagine like how much we've absorbed a caricature of ourselves that actually feminism promoted in a weird way. There's
Mhm.
this the big trope, and you can
Because
tell
again,
that.
that's what we've been entertained with. That's what's been
Yeah,
presented to us. Yep.
well, absolutely, and the big trope that I can always recognize when a young feminist is copying, and she's not actually like thinking, is when she brings up John Wayne, because no one knows who John Wayne is anymore. But
Right.
that it's a trope. It's like this
Yes.
old thing that they've been repeating since people, after the Great Wars, all the baby boomers had daddy issues, and they were mad at their dads because they all liked John Wayne.
Right.
And they were all mad at their dads, and so that became the big symbol of emotionally closed down. Now, if you actually watch his movies, he's like, well, I'll take care of you guys, and
Right.
he's actually a pretty nice guy.
Yeah. He's not that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but he became a symbol for some reason of hatred. All these people, and if you really look what he was doing, it really wasn't that bad. And of course, the dude's just an actor anyway.
Right. He
But
got paid. The dude, I have guys who use him as an example all the time of like, I don't care about how I look, masculinity. It's like, you guys realize that he made a living playing dress up. That is literally what he did. Is he made money to play dress up. He absolutely cared how he looked.
yeah, that dude wore a lot of makeup.
Uh-huh.
Like
Those costumes were very deliberate.
yeah, and that's always what I make fun of him for the same thing. The same kind of guys, watch these guys on the NFL every weekend, and those guys
Yep.
are groomed to the nines. They
Right.
have like $200 manicures, and like they have stylists and people taking care of everything they do so that they look good. But you're sitting home in your sweatpants worshiping them.
Right. And even on the most fundamental level, it's the red team versus the blue team.
Yeah.
There's the most raw, visceral tribalism of we're red and you're blue. And we know that because of the way that we're dressed.
Yeah.
So tell me that those guys don't care. There's a reason you're wearing that man's name on your back and you're identifying with that tribe. You care.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole different. That's a whole different problem.
Yes.
Like, get out and do something, dude.
Right? Oh man.
Yeah, but so I guess what are you working on now? What's the big push for you?
Well, that's a fun question because from a business perspective, it's how to do more because I've had a couple of people ask me, are you planning on writing a follow-up book, or are you planning on are you trying to do something else besides coaching? And no, I'm not planning on doing another follow-up book in that regard, as far as not at least about aesthetics. For me, the big projects are things like, well, honestly, this is what's kind of fun. And this is ultimately what I want the relationship for my clients, for the other guys who follow me on social media, for other guys to understand is I don't think about style probably more than most guys do. I don't think about what I'm going to wear in the morning more than most guys do. I think about what I'm on a call with a client and I'm helping them figure that out. But for me, it's a means to an end because my big projects are, how do I make my kids better? How do I take the guys that I'm lifting weights with in my basement in the morning and red pill them on certain things so that they're not just normies? And how do I build a tribe with these guys? How do I take the other group of guys that I go out with twice a month, and how do we deepen that friendship and deepen that relationship? At the same time, I do have some aesthetic things that I'm working on because And this is one of the things where I envy you, because you get to start the world. You don't have to be part of the world, right? You get to create your very own aesthetic. You
I'm
get
just
to
me.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
the more polarizing that is, the
Mhm.
better it is for you, right? You win from a brand perspective, you win from a personal perspective. And I'm part of not just a tribe of me, especially with my religious affiliations and stuff like this. There's this whole tribe. And I want to incorporate more of that into what my own aesthetics and my own identity are as well. Like some of my friends and I, we've joked about things like you do the Latter-day Saint version of the Sikhs who have their turbans and their kipans, like the knives.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, we're going to do Boss of the Plains hats and Bowie knives or something, like you're just goofing around with stuff like this, but it's,
Mhm.
how do you incorporate? I want to figure out, my challenge is, how do I incorporate more of my identity, my religion, my family, my goals, my aspirations
Mhm.
into an aesthetic that is a little bit more like yours, where it's, when somebody sees that, they go, okay, he's not just a normie. He's not just part of the rest of this world. There's something else that's going on.
Yeah, because clothes do that.
They do.
They separate as much as anything, and that's like you said, the Sikhs hats and so forth. Your headgear is telling me you are not one of us. Like
Exactly.
that's you.
Yep.
You've made that very clear.
Yep. We took the kids to Disneyland last month, and it was so fascinating to be there and to see all the different people who dress very tribally. You get like the very like super Disney people that they wear all that gear, but then you do see Sikhs who are dressed a certain way and Muslims who are dressed a different way. And you've got East Coast versus West Coast and flyover states, and it's all clothing and body fat percentage and all these other, just the way that they walk, or you have Crocs on, or is it boat shoes, or is it Birkenstocks, or all these little subtle cues that people just kind of gloss over until you learn to be fluent in this language. And I think that's what I want for me and my people, is a more unique aesthetic that can separate us from the rest of the world. Now, that's obviously a huge ambition, but it's kind of fun to think about it. How do you do something like that?
Yeah. So just the suits with the little tie and the little name badge isn't doing it for you.
No. See, that works when you're a missionary, and I did
Right.
that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because I can see you guys coming.
Totally.
Mhm.
Totally.
Mhm.
But when you think about it, there's a reason why we do that with the
Oh,
missionaries.
absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially now, where it's even more of a stark contrast to see 19-year-old kids, clean shaven, parts in their hair, dark suit with a white shirt and a tie and a name tag. Like, who else is doing that? Of course, it's the Mormons. Here they come.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're working on incorporating that kind of symbolism, and that's why you said we've talked about that. You're like, oh, I want to do something like that above, in my church or something like that. Like some of the stuff that because I'm just experimenting. All the stuff I do is very experimental, and yeah, you said you've been looking to, who knows, I'm going to see like a neon Mormon sign, like
so
pretty
I'll
soon.
show you one that I just did. So it's this ring that I just had made. Okay. And it very much comes from a conversation that you and I have had, where I took this symbol, it's the seal of Melchizedek. So it represents a priesthood lineage and stuff like that. So that's in there. And then the stone is a Genesis stone. It's banded iron, and it's the same type of stone that was Joseph Smith's seer stone that he found, and that was part of what he used for the translation process and everything. And this is a really good example of, that's one of those things that a lot of people within my religion will kind of shy away from, because if you're not a member of our church, that sounds really weird. Like he used a rock to translate golden plates and all this other stuff. Like I get that there's a level of physicality and mysticism and things like that don't exist in mainstream religion anymore, where it's all just supposed to be spiritual. But I love that that's a unique thing about our theology and about our history. And so I want to embrace stuff like that. And so I wear this as a reminder of those kind of things, like where I come from, what my responsibilities are, the fact that my religion is a physical religion. It's not just you pray and you try to be nice to other people kind of religion. And so it is very much this now expressive symbol that does more for me as the person wearing it and what I see when I see it than it does for somebody else who doesn't even understand what that symbolism is.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's something that when I was building Waldgang and so forth. And also obviously in the things that I wear when I speak. I mean, people probably made fun of me a little bit that I wear these big combat boots. They're logger boots that on stage, right?
Right, in Florida, where it looks miserably hot.
I know, right? And so I'm wearing this like James Bond resort outfit, and then I have these logger boots on, and I just think it's cool to be on stage in boots that I've killed a sheep for Odin in.
Exactly.
You know, those shoes have had blood on them. And
Right, they've earned something.
Yeah, it's symbolism. The same thing that you're talking about, and it adds meaning to life, and that it enriches life by adding that meaning and bringing it in. And something else you said that I think that, you know, people bag on Mormonism because they're like, oh, it's crazy, and the only reason it's crazy is because it's new. Because all religions are crazy.
Recent.
Yeah,
exactly.
all religions are crazy. They all say things that are supernatural because they're religions.
Right.
You know,
but for us, it was 200 years ago instead of 4,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, okay, virgin birth, like all the stuff that other people believe is, you know.
You got to embrace that.
Yeah. I mean, Catholics, there's bleeding bones of saints and all kinds of stuff. And I like that in the world. I want to live in a world with a little more magic in it.
Exactly.
You know, it makes life more interesting and more symbolic. And the way I feel about that kind of stuff is just, if something's meaningful, you don't have to explain it away.
No.
And that's the thing that people always want to do, and you were taught to do that, you know, because science, and you know, we should explain everything away and so forth, but you don't really get anything out of that.
No, let there be magic in the world, especially because we're not omniscient. We can't explain everything away.
Nope.
Right? And so the idea that we think we can, the hubris of thinking that we can, and robbing ourselves of magic and symbolism and everything else is, there's a reason why we're technologically and materially thriving, but culturally and spiritually, we're totally dying and starving. And it's because we've totally taken these things that are not mutually exclusive, science and religion, rationality and emotion, beauty and function, but we've created this barrier that they have to be mutually exclusive. And it's a stupid way of living.
And actually what makes me crazy about this is that the people who do this want to find aliens so bad.
Right. Why can you believe in that?
Yeah. They want to find aliens, and I'm like, you're still looking for God.
Right. You still have to have faith in that idea.
Yeah. You still have faith, like the aliens, and then the aliens will tell us why we exist. Like it's the exact same thing.
It's the same thing. Yep.
And you know, like I used to listen to know some guys who were really into Graham Hancock, and he has these theories about, like, if you know, there's the time when the flood happened, and that explains all these major religions, and this is when it happened, and this is why, and I think it still goes back to aliens. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, those things are unknowable because you're talking about before written history, so you can't say if this affected this at all.
Right. Good
luck.
You
never prove that.
No.
But you want to sit and nerd out about it forever, and because somehow it explains your universe.
Yep. And it makes it safe and compartmental and understandable, because magic is scary.
Yeah.
Right. Alchemy is scary. Symbolism is scary. God is scary. But if we can make ourselves God, if we can make everything bland and quantifiable and boring and safe, then it comes back to the same thing that we've been talking about the whole time, is it makes it so that we're comfortable in our mediocrity.
Absolutely. Actually, I think that's good. That's a good end, right? That's a good end. We went from style to magic. That's basically how our conversations go.
It's usually how they go. Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you know, is there, like I said, is there anything that you are working on in terms of events or promoting right now? I know you're doing the 21 thing.
Yep. I'll be keynoting for the next Patriarch edition, which will be in May.
Okay.
Yep. And then I will be speaking again at the regular convention in October. So those are the big events planned for this next year. Yeah.
All right, man. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on my first episode of the new podcast. I appreciate it very much.
I'm very honored to have been your first guest. So thanks for having me on, dude.
All right, man. Great to talk to you.
Thanks.
All right, see you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching or listening to Start the World. My personal mission is to help men become the best versions of themselves, and to face some of the challenges that we all face in the 21st century. It's getting weird out there. So I'm having conversations with other men who are helping men face and overcome these challenges. And that's why I'm so excited about the new season of Start the World. I have a lot of people scheduled. I'm going to talk to psychologists, therapists, martial artists, coaches, trainers, artists, spiritual leaders, and maybe just some fun weirdos. We're going to try to put out an episode every week for a while, maybe 30 to 50 episodes this year. I'm going to get some lavalier mics, maybe do some in-person interviews, and maybe even some workout content. I think a lot of people would actually like that. If you want to support this podcast or just my work generally, I'm writing a book this year that I'm also pretty excited about. Hopefully it'll come out in the fall. I'm using Subscribestar. Subscribestar is an anti-censorship platform. You can sign up using a link in the show notes or on YouTube, or just by typing in subscribestar.com/Jack Donovan, and it should take you there. So thanks again for watching or listening to Start the World. This is Jack Donovan. Stay solar.